Okay, let's take a couple of questions and we'll see how we get on. I'll start with I'll start with Kate and then come to Mike. There is a microphone coming round. So if you could just say who you are, please, and then...
Hi, Kate Carpenter, Jacobs. Question for Graeme. You talked about using more low-cost technology for detection and operation, and about the day-to-day variations, teaching the machine learning of what the road looks like with snow on and with sun and with shade and so on. I wonder whether there's experience of the sort of the once-a-year operation rather than once a day of, for example, the hole in the road that was protected by signs and cones, and as signs and cones have been reassigned by students at night, or the sort of the unexpected event, having to drive the wrong way down the road, the fireman, directing the traffic because there's been a major incident. Those sorts of things. Can those vehicles detect it? And things like where you've got a 4-lane urban road, 2 lanes in each direction, if you've got a high-sided vehicle in each near-side lane, the driver's in the off-side lane. Now, humans can't do this, but I wonder whether the autonomous vehicle can do it. How do you detect when the lights are red?
Right.
Can we hold file? Can we take one more? Just hear one more question whilst you prepare the answer to that. And Mike.
Thank you. Mike Walter from Transportation Professional magazine. Looking ahead to the next few years, what would each of you say is the greatest single challenge that lies ahead in developing driverless systems? Is it safety, public acceptance, or the conflict between these new vehicles and more traditional cars? And I wondered if the general election may be a bit of a fear on the radar. Could that sort of upset things if we have a new administration which is perhaps not so keen on this brave new world?
Thanks. I'm conscious that each of these questions could generate about half an hour's debate for each one. So if we could, if you could take Graeme on this one.
So I'll take the first one, then I'll let Nick take the lead on the second one. So the vision system that I described is what we use for localization. But so localization really helps you understand where you are in the world. But the perceptions, there's the what's around me that helps you decide how do I respond to other road users, to traffic incidents, to roadworks on the road, to bikes and things. So you would never trust a map as being accurate for more than 2 seconds after it's been surveyed. The map really helps you figure out where you are, and use that as part of the basic navigation task. So yes, we very definitely be able to identify people and bikes and road operations. I think to the second part of the question of can these systems work in a superhuman way, then I think the answer is the vehicles we've showed, not yet, but I think all things are possible with technology. So there's a lot of things like I think Lola talked about V2V communication, or communication between vehicles, communication with infrastructure. So certainly we see a lot of people are actually leveraging those type of capabilities to improve the car to a point where it can see around corners and where it can see other things. We wouldn't always rely on connectivity or the absence of a connected signal to tell us definitely that something was there or wasn't there, but we would always use it as an input to figure out, to maybe help give us more confidence of what was around us as well. So we very rarely just depend on one input to make a decision like that. Nick.
Yeah, and to pick up on that as well, I know in Milton Keynes, and it's a system we're interested in Greenwich, that you could add sensors to the junction to give the vehicles at that junction a sense of what's coming around them if it's a blind turn, so that the cameras might be able to see and then communicate if they perceive it as safe to proceed, given their better perspective on what's coming or what's approaching. On the general election, I think the issues that we're addressing are important no matter what political colour prevails about creating a safer, cleaner, more affordable, more efficient, and more accessible transport. The specifics of how that's implemented might be different depending on which administration is leading, but the overall requirement is there in either case or in any case. So I think that there should still be that momentum no matter what happens. And in terms of the biggest challenge, I think it depends who you ask. I mean, I think Graeme, what Oxbotica do, what Graeme does is magic, and they're going to get it solved very, very quickly, and this will all happen, and so the technology is not an issue. I think more about the societal change and the public perception and interaction between human-driven and automated vehicles as being the big challenges. And I don't underestimate the challenges that Oxbotica face.
Can I just ask Rama, because I think Rama, you told us that in California, the petrol heads welcome this because they'll be able to nip by in their non-autonomous vehicles. Isn't the challenge and to convert the petrol heads into the use of autonomous vehicles rather than using the non-autonomous vehicles?
I think autonomy is not something that will happen overnight. It's not binary. It's not either or. I think to answer your question and also the last question, I think one of the biggest barriers or challenges is that, and I loved Graeme's simplification of complex systems. I think it's just a simple question of where do we start? So, do you start by converting petrol heads? Maybe not. Do you start with the area of the greatest needs? Probably. I think embedded in that is something of acceptance. Most people will happily step on a plane. The first time I went in an autonomous vehicle at Heathrow, I was scared for the first minute when it pulled away, and there was no brake pedal, and I'm not going to say how old I am, but I'm younger than the lady that you showed on the Sky website. So I think it transcends age, it transcends gender, but that question of where do we start? Is it transport? Is it delivery? And I think that's going to be, I wouldn't say a barrier, but a challenge, because finding that sort of feasible area that sort of proves this to the wider public, but also to the petrol heads, I think is incredibly important. So sorry, a slightly waffly answer, but trying to answer two questions at once.
No, it's a big question, and it's a good answer, I think. I think there's a couple of questions at the front. I'll take these, David and Martin, if you can both give us your questions, and we'll get some panel responses.
Thank you. Just a question for Graeme first, if I may. Graeme, if I can use the typology of the SAE levels of automation from 0 to 5, is your vision like that of Google, of going straight to level 5, that is full automation with no human involvement at all, or do you envisage you've got to pass through the very challenging level 3, which is one where the vehicle does the normal things, but the driver has to be available in an emergency to have control handed back? And it seems to me, certainly the literature I've read, there's some real challenging issues about, can level 3 actually work, and can you assume people will be able to accept handback in a very short space of time? And sorry, a quick question for Nick. We've seen a little bit of a utopian vision about calling up your AV when you want it. There's a trade-off, of course, between availability and cost, and there'll be certain times of the day and the week when they'll all be in use, and you won't be able to call one up when you want it, unless you're prepared to pay to have an awful lot of them lying idle most of the time in order that they can meet the peak demand. I mean, there's some significant business model issues around that. I wonder if you or Rama have thought about those.
I will get Martin to give his question as well, if you can prepare your answers, chaps.
I was Martin Tugwell. I chair the Learned Society and Technical Strategy Board for the institution. I was intrigued by about autonomous vehicles dreaming. I was thinking about androids and dreaming of electric sheep. But my question is a bit more sort of, is there a danger of a law of unintended consequences here? So I've seen many an instance of illustration of trying to convince people as to why public transport is the best way forward for urban areas, because you have a picture of 40 cars taking up an enormous amount of space and it can be solved by one public transport vehicle. Are we not in danger of going the other way round and actually cluttering up our urban environments when actually we're trying to sell something previously very different?
Okay, if we can take the level of autonomy question.
I'll take the first one. Nick, you can take the second one. So for those of you who don't know, there are 5 levels of autonomy, and they're on a scale called the SAE scale. It's a Society of Automotive Engineers in the US, isn't it? So level 2 is what you might call hands off. Level 3 is what you might call eyes off. Level 4 is what you might call brain off. And level 5 is like an empty car driving itself around. And so the problem with level 3 is you've got drivers who are not thinking, not paying any attention to what's going around them, and at that point they're riding in the vehicle, I guess, but they're still expected to be able to come back into the loop and take control of the vehicle, which I think is a lot of the intellectual discussion around, is it viable? So from our perspective, at Oxbotica, we're very much focused on level 4, level 5. So we're designing solutions that will work at level 4, level 5 level, because we think it's easier from then to step back if we need to. I think if you start off designing something at level 2 or level 3, you can never step up to it. I think there are challenges in all of these different levels. I think particularly level 4, level 5, if you were to think of I think Ford announced a vehicle in 2021 that will not have a steering wheel, will not have pedals. The challenge with that vehicle is if you're going to use it every day, you need to have a real confidence that it's not only going to be able to get you to work, it's going to be able to get you home again as well. And on that journey to work, you can't have the vehicle decide it suddenly can't go across a junction, or it can't cope with rain, or it can't cope with and some sort of eventuality. So I think it's, getting any of these levels working in the next 10 years, other than in a very specific environment, is going to be quite challenging. Personally, I think level 3 is a hard sell. I really find it hard to think that you can bring drivers back into the loop in less than 20 seconds. So you'd probably need to be, there might be 1 or 2 use cases or very specific places where you can say to the driver, your vehicle is going to be fully autonomous at, say, level 4, level 5, for this part of your journey, and I will tell you 30 seconds ahead before I need you to take control. So I think you'll start to see more hybrid systems like that than sort of true full level 4 systems that work everywhere, all the time, in every weather condition.
It does seem to take away one of the potential benefits if you've been out for a drink and you're suddenly told that in 20 seconds you've got to retake control. It's a very quick sobering up exercise. I think the next question was to do with sort of the peak hour demand.
Yeah, and I think...
And linked to that, I suppose, was the cluttering up networks.
Yes, yeah. So I was going to say, I think I can try and address both of those questions. So yes, absolutely, it's something we think about, and it's something I'm concerned about, is the kind of social equity of transport in that utopian vision, and user pays principle, that the cost might be very high, whether there would need to be some sort of differentiation between where you're travelling from, where you're going to, and how much that costs. I think that absolutely would happen. And it seems that the automated vehicles, when you need to know who's in it and where they're going and what journey they've taken, is a way in which you kind of might achieve road user charging by a kind of sidestep. And I think that is probably where things would go. But yes, that social equity. So I worry about you end up with a low-cost airline version of road travel and a premium version of air travel. So in one way, one version you get a direct route with no adverts, and in the other you get a more circuitous route that takes you past the cafe that's selling you a certain product, and that gets advertised to you. But it's cheaper, and so whether I don't run, but you probably come across some of those fears in your workshops. And just on the other question around clutter, the Oxbotica technology is not particularly fussy about what vehicle it can be mounted on, as long as the system can tell the vehicle how to move and the sensors can be mounted in the right place. You could operate it on a double-decker bus or on a single-person loo pod. So you would use the vehicles that meet the use case.
So I think just a couple of quick comments, because Graeme and Nick were very erudite and full in their answers. But I think in terms of, a dystopia, one thing I would hate to see, and lots of people talked about in the workshop, is that, autonomous vehicles just become a premise of the elite or a premise of a kind of closed system. And I just sincerely hope, and it's a real hope of the consortium, that it's a lot more democratized, even in the way that we develop them, that it's developed with people, it's co-designed with people, and sometimes those people who don't have visibility or voice. So I think that's incredibly important. And then just talking to the law of unintended consequences, that's the law that often comes up and stuffs us as designers. So it's a fantastic law to always have writ large on any project that you're doing. And I think there's lots of other things. Both of you have talked about the congestion, but there's other things that struck us and came up in the research, like what if pedestrians misbehave? So could you walk across the M25 and, the wonderful videos Graeme showed of the vehicle screeching to a halt? What if you're a red light jumper and a cyclist? What if you are that boy racer car driver that just wants to cut everyone up? Does misbehavior factor in to the design of these things as well?
Thank you very much. There were some hands up in the... Can we get one? I know the gentleman towards the back has had his hand up, if I can make sure, and then we'll come over to Andrew.
Yeah, Neil Gregg from the Institute of Advanced Motorists. It was a question about design. I just wondered if the people you talked to had been a bit disappointed by some of the designs. I mean, if you watch the movies, we were promised DeLoreans and Iron Man, Audi R8s, and we got Harry. He's not exactly sexy. And so that was one part of it. The other part was, I've talked to some people about if they're willing to give up, go into the driverless car, give up control, they actually want more crash protection and less crash protection. And what seemed to be missing from some of your designs was crash protection. So it was those two issues, design and crash protection.
Can we take that one whilst we get the microphone to the back, please?
Sure, fantastic question. Thank you for that. I think in terms of design, I wouldn't say Harry is not a DeLorean, but I think it's a test bed. And I think the key thing with Harry is that it moves away from that kind of three-box car shapes that cars still follow, pretty much. And it asks the question of what if this is a product, a piece of architecture, or a service? The drawings that we showed are really there to fire people's imagination and get them beyond thinking of this is a Ford Sierra from the 1980s without the driver, because it could be so much more. It could be the banana on wheels. It could be the hotel room. So I think no one said they're disappointed. I think people are rather more like a kid in a candy shop because they see something that looks different. And one of the things about Harry that I think is quite deliberately unique, you don't know if it's coming or going, and there's a little bit of a deliberate kind of conversation to be had about that. So in some ways, it's a conversation starter. And the second question... Crash protection. So we have RSA, Royal Sun Alliance, as a partner in the consortium. And typically, when you look across the world, most vehicular accidents involve a human being of some form. In some countries, it's as high as 96%. So one of the things we were playing with is, do you need seatbelts anymore? Do you actually need airbags? Could the vehicle navigate its way in such a way that you don't need those forms of rolling crash protection anymore? And I think it's an interesting question. Does that mean that you don't have to coat the car in soft leather, airbags, cushions? Could you actually have hard ceramic? And I think that's just a really, really interesting question to ask. I think, the reality is you're not going to have it like, Tops Tiles bathroom. But I think autonomous vehicles will have an impact not just on the insurance industry, but on the way we look, perceive, and test and create standards for crash protection.
I think the vehicle you showed with the swimming pool would look a bit like a Tops Tiles. Yeah, thank you.
David Trousdale from Amy. It's probably... What are you asking from infrastructure providers in terms of how the road's designed? So you'll notice quite a lot of the people on here, you know, the Jacobs, the Amys, the Kias. We sort of are working alongside you on a number of projects, but we need to know, do we need to get rid of the white lines? Do we get rid of the street signs? What is the future road design like? I know you might not be able to answer that, but that question is going to keep getting raised because we're the guys who are building those roads and looking after them. So we're trying to work out what the future holds and how we design them so that you're happy with your vehicles being on them. A good example is near the Edward Said Business School, where they've gotten rid of the pavement and made it just a general vehicle zone. As that lady said in the video earlier on, if she hasn't got a pavement that she's walking on, how will she be able to walk her, well not walk her, the dog walk her almost, around the city? So that's really a general question. What's the expectation of infrastructure providers?
Was there another question in the could we take this one as well, please, and just a few rows in front, and I'll come back. And if we can keep these answers fairly brief now, please, because we are moving towards the end. Thank you.
Hi, Mux Baiji, KPMG. A slightly different tack of question. Reflecting on the presentations that Lola and yourselves did, it seems to me that there will need to be a phenomenal amount of interconnectivity, quite seamless interconnectivity between vehicles and the infrastructure, vehicles to people, and so on. And that suggests to me that there'll need to be some sort of a central platform that allows all that interconnect, just for data, but perhaps also the physical hardware that's running around, the money that might need to flow. I'm interested in your views in terms of the extent to which that platform will just emerge organically and it'll be more open source, so Android-esque, or is it going to be much more centralized control, more like perhaps the iOS end of it?
Probably not a question that lends itself to a quick answer, but if we can give it a go and we get the microphone towards the back, I'll try and fit in just one or two more before we wrap up. Graeme, can you take the second one perhaps first?
The second one first.
Well,
Okay,
either way, I don't mind.
I was just going to talk about road design.
Okay, yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Not that I'm an expert.
Yeah, fine.
I mean, people ask us all the time about safety of autonomous vehicles, especially as we're driving around, you know, in Greenwich through like crowds of pedestrians. Now we have inherited quite a dangerous road infrastructure. You know, if you were to start again, you wouldn't invent a footpath next to a road where school children can walk along 2 feet away from cars that are legally able to go 60 miles an hour. That's just a crazy situation. So I think as you think to road design of the future, you know, I think you can start to think of maybe different ways of segregating traffic. You know, I think somebody earlier mentioned you know, maybe manual drivers taking advantage of autonomous vehicles. That's always going to happen because the autonomous vehicle is going to be more courteous, it's going to give way. I think if there was you know, if you were, for example, able to construct an autonomous vehicle motorway between, you know, Birmingham and London, for example, you would create a new industry. You know, being able to structure dedicated environments for these vehicles to run in, the industry would move much more quickly. You know, we're looking very much at different types of vehicles for different environments. So the Harry vehicle you've seen already here is a type of vehicle that would work very much in a campus type environment. Clearly wouldn't work on a motorway. So I think as you sort of extrapolate forwards, you'll start to see different usage models emerge. You'll start to see different types of environments, maybe more secluded environments where, you know, small vehicles will work, autonomous vehicles will work. And then for all of the reasons that Rama was talking about, crash protection, you know, these vehicles won't mix anymore with big passenger cars. You know, you would not mix Harry with its eggshell covering with a 20-ton truck or a 40-ton bus. So I think, you know, more and more as I look forward, you know, I see a lot of segregation of autonomous traffic from non-autonomous traffic.
Nick, can you take the interconnectivity?
Yes. Yeah. So the question was about the platform, and one thing that occurred to me as you were asking the question, I was thinking we need to, whilst all that connectivity is great and can achieve huge things, we need to be mindful of digital divide and that there is a significant proportion of people who don't have that connectivity, but mustn't be kind of disadvantaged by the transport systems that we introduce. So making sure there's that, and I don't, Rama, that might have come up in workshops. I think it will probably emerge in a patchwork that might need to be drawn together at some point. And it's certainly great to have TFL as part of the advisory group, and they're taking a big interest in how connected automated vehicles might improve their ability to manage traffic and improve people's journeys. So I think that with their input and the likes of Royal Borough of Greenwich as well, and their responsibility to manage transport services for their borough within the TfL context, a workable system will emerge, a better system will emerge. How much better that is, remains to be seen.
Can I? Yeah, I think one of the things we've seen is, it's a level of investment, and we're seeing a lot of money going into America. And I suppose the risk is, from the UK's point of view, that these platforms and systems, get developed in America, which the rest of the world has to potentially take on by default. So it's I suppose how the UK can establish its place and to lead the world in this development. Can I take? I think it's going to have to be the two final questions, and Andrew, if you have a question as well, I think. So.
Mohammed Raja from University of Greenwich. Well, I just want to ask, when a technical problem occurs in a normal vehicle, human has the ability to limit its danger. What about the autonomous vehicles?
Okay, thank you. And Andrew, do you want to give a short question as well, and then we'll...
Yeah, just, I suppose, quite a quick one. It was really for Rama, I think. We're all really interested in transport and moving, because that's what we do. So the language we use is about vehicles and drivers. I see potentially a long way in the future a very different thing than what you're talking about and some of the things you were saying. So how long do you think it will be before we stop thinking of these things that move us around as vehicles, but actually as places in themselves?
You ready for the first one, Graeme?
Sure. So I think the first one is probably about safety and the safety of the system. So I think if you look at the statistics, something like 95% of accidents are caused by people. So if you take the people out of the loop, the world's a safer place. Seriously. So yes. So no, there will still be accidents. There'll be new accidents that never existed before. There'll be accidents we never dreamed could occur. But no, the reason that a lot of us are in this game is because we really are dedicated to improving safety. I've been working on autonomous vehicles since 1992, and my vision is to move to a world where there are less fatalities. There are less families losing family members through things that we can avoid through the technology that we have. So, the advantages of an autonomous system is it doesn't lose concentration, it doesn't lose focus, it's able to think about what it's doing. We're able to teach a car in, say, London, the mistakes that maybe a car in Edinburgh made that same morning, and avoid an accident that might otherwise have occurred. All of these things are possible, and why shouldn't they be? So, for sure, you will see autonomous vehicles come. You will see autonomous vehicles, make the wrong decisions and have accidents. But over time, we'll start to see a lot less fatalities that way than you would normally if we continue the way that we are.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. If vehicles can learn from each other in Glasgow and London, then highways design engineers and project managers and the like should also be able to be learning in a shared experience environment.
So I really want to thank you for that last question, because it talks to something that we haven't brought up on stage, which is language, culture, the kind of socio-cultural side of autonomous vehicles. And, I'm a great lover of language, and it's incredibly important. One of the things that we have done at the London Transport Museum exhibition is we've had members of the public come through and start to draw various things about their future imaginings or their fears, but also to try and talk about the language. So we haven't analysed that data because we just got that in yesterday, and I didn't want to stay up all night. So I'm very excited to see what people say. And one of the things that kind of struck us is, you know, if an autonomous vehicle is the size of a shopping bag, is it a piece of product design? Is it a service design? All that we can say is actually you're designing an experience. Now, if that shopping bag goes with your family pet down to the local, mini-mart or newsagents to get a pint of milk, what is the dog? Is it a driver? Is it an operator? Is it a companion? You know, is it a shadowy figure? Is it haunting it? You know, what is it? So I think we're in a world of firsts here with autonomous vehicles, and I think language is one of those incredibly powerful, emotive, and evocative things that we need to get right. So I think just final sentence really is to say that I think instead of designing vehicles, which, you know, that since Harley Earl in the 1930s, the establishing of vehicle design as a kind of tradition, as a kind of discipline, we're seeing a really big shift into the design of mobility. So I think vehicles are part of that node on a network. Vehicles will be there, but you see product designers, architects, service designers, non-designers getting into vehicle design as well. So co-design becomes incredibly important, and I think that shift from designing things and artifacts, designing experiences is also important.
Thank you, Rama. That last response opens up about another 30 or 40 questions, but we will leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for your questions. I'd like to thank you all very much for coming along tonight. For me, it's been a fascinating series of presentations, which has really given me much food for thought. And I hope we can take that away, you know, as a profession, as an industry, and really start to have this debate about, you know, what it means for our work, what it means for society. So also again, I'd like to thank Nick, Graeme, Rama and Lola in our absence, and could we thank our speakers again in the normal way. Thank you.